Hello, are you having a problem with cost of capital? Come, let me show you. Cost of capital. All right, so first and foremost, what is cost of capital? Cost of capital is seen as the minimum required rate of return, right? Minimum required rate of return. You can just call it minimum required rate of return. What does this mean? The overall cost of raising a fund is what you call cost of capital. Remember, there are basically two major ways you can raise a fund, right? Sources of finance. Or finance. There are two ways. It's either you're raising the fund through equity, or you decided to raise the finance through debt. If you raise the finance through equity, remember, the people that have invested equity in your business are expecting what you call a return. That return is what you call a dividend, right? So what you pay to them, the dividend, to them is a return to them, right? So that dividend you pay to you as a company, that dividend is like a cost to you, right? So return here is dividend, right? The people that invested debt instrument in your company, they expect what you call a return also, which is like interest, right? Return here, what you're giving to them is interest. Remember, this dividend, what you pay to these people is dividend, and that gives me my cost of equity. I'll denote that by cost of equity. The people that I'm paying interest also, it's like cost of debt, right? So I will call that cost of debt, which is KD. Now, what will now be my cost of capital? Assuming that I'm raising this business using equity only and also debt. Remember, this is just for illustration. Under equity, you can have other types of equity. Debt also, you can have different kinds of debt. Floating debt, redeemable, irredeemable, convertible, and all of that. But for simplicity, what we are looking at is just assuming that we are raising this fund using just equity and debt. In that way, on that case, how do I get my cost of capital? Cost of capital in this case, we are saying that this cost of capital here is getting a singular value that represents the weighted average cost of pulling together this fund. It means that my cost of capital here becomes the cost of equity here multiplied by the value that equity bear to the total value of the organization. I'll come to that in a bit. VO plus, now I've come to the debt part. I also have cost of debt multiplied by the value of debt divided by the VO, right? And then because interest is an allowable expense for tax purpose, I would have 1 minus T here. Now, this is the simplest form of calculating cost of capital. In the exam, what you now need to do is simple. You need to understand how to calculate cost of equity, how to calculate value of equity, value of organization. If you can calculate value of equity and value of debt, my value of organization is simply adding value of equity plus value of debt. It's just like you're weighting it, right? What we are saying here is if my value of equity equals to 200,000 and value of debt equals to 300,000, this total is 500,000. This is what you call value of organization, right? We call it value of organization because I will explain that to us in a bit. Because if this is the total balance sheet size of my company, it means that the total asset, the value of my asset will be reflected in this 500,000. It means that my total asset must also be 500,000 because I've raised money, 200,000 from equity, 300,000 from debt. It means that that value also should reflect or should be reflected in the value of asset that I have in the company. All right. So what we are doing here, this VE over VO, we are simply saying 200,000 which is the proportion of equity to the total value, divided by 500,000. And this guy also, value of debt is 300, which will be 300,000 divided by 500,000. Basically, so what we are saying is anytime you are calculating cost of equity, all you need to do is simple. Get your cost of equity, which we are going into, value of equity, which also I will show you how to calculate value of equity, right? Then VO, I've just explained to you. When you get your VO and you get your VD, add the two together, that's what gives you value of organization. Then plus cost of debt also is here. We'll look at how to calculate cost of debt, the different types of debt, and then you have the value of debt divided by value of organization. And then in the exam, this tax rate would always be given to you. So basically, that is the overview of cost of capital. All right, remember that you can have, like I said, there are other types of debt, other types of equity that you can. That means this formula can actually extend to as much as cost of X multiplied by value of X over VO, like that to infinity, depending on how many sources of finance you're looking at. So basically, that is the overview of the cost of capital. Like I said, if you don't forget, just cost of capital, we're saying you want to get a rate that reflects or that represents the cost, the average cost of getting all these funds together. And we said sources of finance, we're assuming we have just equity and debt, right? So the cost of equity multiplied by the weight or the proportion that equity bears to the total organization, plus the cost of debt multiplied by the weight that debt bears to the total value of the organization, and then net of tax on that debt, right? And that's what gives us the cost of capital. And this cost of capital is what we call the weighted average cost of capital, which you can call WACC, that people call WACC. All right. So if this video is helpful to you, please like, share the video, and also comment if you have any issues. Thank you for watching. See you again in the next video. Bye.